Hello, everybody. My name is Pippa Weeble, and I am a medical doctor and a transformational breath facilitator and trainer. And I'm honoured to be a member of the IBF executive team. And I am really excited to share with you on World Breathing Day 2020. I intended to record this message a few weeks ago, and unfortunately I have had a very close and personal encounter with coronavirus. So please forgive me if I'm a little breathless from now and then as I'm speaking to you. Now, originally I wanted to talk to you about mental health and breathing, because it's a really big topic and it feels important. And then coronavirus happened, and I think it's probably even more important that I speak to you and share with you about my experiences with this and my research and knowledge. So what I have prepared is a romp through things that are relevant to breathing for mental health and resilience. I want to talk a little bit about what puts people at risk of mental health problems and the signs and symptoms of mental health problems that we might see. What to do when we recognize those signs, and how we can promote and maintain good mental health. I'm going to talk a little bit about how our breath relates to anxiety and how breath work can be really impactful for people who are struggling, particularly with anxiety, but also with mental health problems. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about breath work and COVID-19, because I can. So here we are in 2020, and mental health problems are a really significant thing. 25% of adults will experience depression in their lifetime, and 12% of adults will have social anxiety disorder. 6% of adults experience generalized anxiety disorder, and my suspicion is right now that a lot more than these numbers are currently experiencing significant anxiety. Anxiety disorders commonly coexist with other mental health problems, most notably depression and substance misuse, and so more than ever it's important for us to talk about this. These problems have a serious impact. About 30% of medical consultations relate to psychological and social issues. I think now, again, that level's probably much higher. And in my experience, there are very few physical problems that don't have a mental or emotional element that is making them worse. Whether we avoid mental health problems, whether we find ways to cope that may be unhealthy, or whether we respond with acknowledgement and seek support, mental health has a real significant impact on our economy at a national level, on our personal and professional relationships, on our finances, on our freedom, and on our quality of life. So why are these problems so common? Well, we live under constant pressure. Our stress response evolved for survival when running from a hungry tiger. And that is the level of fear that we experience for our lives in every aspect of our human existence in the 21st century. It's very difficult to measure the true impact of this, but if we look at chronic health conditions that we know are related to this chronic stress process, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic inflammatory disorders, and of course, mental health problems, we can see that this is having a real impact. Are we conscious of it in our day-to-day lives? Are we educated about it when we go to school? Do we have any of the knowledge and skills that we need to manage it? Loneliness and isolation are a really important factor for mental health problems, and never more so than in the last few weeks and in the coming months. We underestimate the value of human touch and connection. And there's lots of reasons for that. Our education is amazing, but it leads us to focus on our careers from a very early age, and often to have the freedom to move away from our family units. Many people in my generation haven't built families of their own because they've been focusing on their careers. Social media allows us to feel connected even when we're apart from one another, but it doesn't provide that same intimacy and human connection. Social media also allows us to present a reality that we choose to share, and creates an environment where often we feel an intolerance to people who are expressing or sharing their pain in such a public forum. The truth is that technology allows us to work and socialize in a virtual world, but it's very difficult to turn off. How do we balance our material needs and our life's purpose? Does our education really prepare us for the world we live in? How do we decide where we place our focus? Do I play music? Do I do medicine? Am I a breath worker? Can I be all three? What aspects of ourselves do we sacrifice to achieve our goals? And what if we can no longer do what we're trained for? What if we can no longer do what we love? Do we know who we are? In our society, our identity is bound up in our reputation. It's bound up in our specialist abilities. And there's a lot of rivalry and competitiveness and an attitude of lack that I think we're all becoming conscious of now. There's often a lack of job security. There's often negative feedback that we need to deal with. How do we manage our personal identity alongside our public one? And how do we create boundaries to protect our time and our space and our person? However we choose to express ourselves in the world, there's a compromise. If we choose to be self-employed or do freelance work, this allows us to be more creative and flexible, but it relies on us having the skills to arrange work, complete work, organize ourselves, organize our time and our finances. There's little financial security. And what happens when you're not able to work? If we work for an organization or under a contract, then that provides financial security and it supports us with benefits and structure and organization, but we lose the autonomy about the actual work that we do. I'm constantly becoming aware of patients, clients, friends, myself, suffering with physical or mental injury, overuse or misuse, because we are so afraid to stop. And we're being invited to really understand what happens when we're unwell or we're injured. What if the intensity of the work that we do is causing us physical or mental harm? What if the place in which we work puts us at risk? Would my job be secure if people knew that I was struggling? And often we use alcohol, nicotine, or recreational drugs as a means to escape, avoid, or simply to help us function from day to day, rather than addressing these questions. It all comes down to priorities. There isn't enough time in the day. We have a lack of control over our working hours, particularly when we're able to work with people from all over the world. Many people have a lack of resources for physical, mental, and emotional support. Many people don't have an established routine, an inconsistent diet, sleep, and exercise, a lack of personal space, and all of this can have a real impact on our personal relationships. What stops us from seeking help? Well, feeling embarrassed, ashamed, or guilty, blaming ourselves, criticizing ourselves, pride, personality, depression. When you're feeling hopeless, it's very, very hard to believe that it's possible to feel different. As those of us who rely on unhealthy crutches or avoid what's happening, there are many who address the physical aspects without talking about the psychological or the social part, and so they never actually resolve the underlying issue. There are people who don't want to take responsibility and they expect medication or a therapist or their boss to fix the problem. And there's a real stigma and fear of losing work. The saddest thing is when people feel that cost will stop them from fixing this. And I really encourage you that that should never, ever be a factor in maintaining and achieving full mental health. Depression, anxiety, and panic attacks are not signs of weakness. They are signs of trying to remain strong for far too long. So, what do mental health problems look like? You're wondering why I've got Coca-Cola bottles lined up on the screen. Bear with me, I will explain myself. People with mental health problems generally look like everybody else. These are all perfectly good bottles of Coca-Cola. And when you open them, they're all fizzy. And it's exciting and pleasant, and there's lots of interesting things to find out on the inside. If you take one of these bottles of Coca-Cola and you shake it, give it a really good shake, 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 and you put it back down in that line, it looks exactly like all the other Coca-Cola bottles. But this Coca-Cola bottle is anxious. And when you pick it up and try and open it, it goes psh. If you poke it, it will explode. And that's what anxiety is like. People with anxiety are more fizzy on a day-to-day basis. They're more likely to explode if they're poked, and they need to find ways of just letting out a little bit of that fizz. It's possible for a person with anxiety to function brilliantly in society. They are hardworking, they are great friends, they're great employees. If you want something done right, ask someone with anxiety to do it. It's not a problem in its own right. It's only when that anxiety is so high that they can't actually function from day to day that things begin to be a problem. And if over a long period of time you took a Coca-Cola bottle and you shook it and put it down, and you shook it again and put it down, and you shook it again and put it down, and whether you let the steam off regularly or not, over time, with constant shaking and agitation, that Coca-Cola bottle will start to go flat. And that's what depression is like. When you open it, it's still Coca-Cola, but it doesn't have that fizz anymore. The analogy isn't perfect, but understanding that we all exist on a spectrum from flat to extremely fizzy, and that any amount of shaking can lead us to move on that scale is a really helpful way to understand what happens in anxiety and low mood. In depression, people experience low mood and a pessimistic thought process. They have little pleasure and interest in doing things, low energy, poor concentration, poor sleep. Their appetite may be affected, and they may feel that they're letting others down or letting themselves down. They may also have thoughts of self-harm or ending their life. This process affects 1 in 4 people in their lifetime. It develops slowly and insidiously in response to continuous stress, and it culminates in burnout or breakdown when the person simply cannot function by suppressing these feelings any longer. It's absolutely made worse with drugs or alcohol, and these things are often used in order to avoid dealing with an underlying problem. Let's talk about anxiety. Anxiety is a combination of emotions, behaviors, thoughts, and a physical experience. And it's a vicious cycle. When I experience my heart racing, I feel frightened. I think I'm going to have a panic attack, and I suddenly have to get out of the situation. By removing myself from the situation, I think about a lost opportunity and I feel ashamed of myself. And then I start to sweat and I go around and around and around in circles, winding the situation up. You can start this process anywhere with a thought, a feeling, a behavior, or a physical sensation. But we will all have patterns in the way that we think and feel and do that take us into this process. On a physical level, adrenaline is activating a physical response that is preparing our body for action. This is your fight, flight, or freeze response. The adrenaline causes an increase in my heart rate, which increases blood flow to my big muscles, preparing me to run. I start to sweat, which reduces my core body temperature so that that keeps my system safe as I am running away or fighting. My breathing rate, my respiratory rate increases and my airways relax in order to maximize the amount of oxygen I can get into my system and make sure that I can breathe out the carbon dioxide that my big muscles are going to create as I'm running or fighting. My mouth will dry, all the blood from my digestion will divert to those big muscles where it's needed, and my pupils will constrict so that I can see far away in the distance to spot a safe place that I can run to. All of these symptoms are fantastic if I'm running away from a hungry tiger. But when we experience those in our day-to-day lives, it's a very different experience. How I interpret those physical changes affects my emotional and mental state and will impact on the way that I respond to those sensations. Under chronic stress, we produce cortisol, a stress hormone, which keeps us in this constant state of agitation or arousal and prevents us from being able to rest and recover fully. Now it all comes down to arousal. And I like the word arousal because it's not about anxiety. Anxiety is a judgment that I put on this physical state. And I could equally call it excitement, but that's also a judgment. So let's call it arousal. I have mental anxiety, thoughts and feelings. I have physical experiences that I'm having. My physical response to a situation and how I interpret that response will add up to how aroused I am, or how alert, or how anxious, or how excited I am in any particular situation. Now, being highly aroused is brilliant in protecting us when we're running from a hungry tiger, and it's essential for optimal performance if I were an athlete where strength, stamina, and endurance are required. But high arousal impairs performance. It impairs coordination. It impairs fine muscle movement, memory, language, communication, and concentration. And it impairs our ability to rest and recover from an injury or a trauma. What we want is to live our lives in the zone with enough arousal to really enjoy everything that we do and to perform well in everything that we do. If I'm not excited enough, I don't perform very well because maybe I don't care too much, or maybe it's not that important. If I am way over the top and I'm super, super aroused, then I might technically fail at something that mattered a lot to me. So optimal performance is about being able to manage and dance with these changes that happen in my body. Life, like a wave. We can't change the way that it breaks. We can only change the way that we ride it. Riding the wave is difficult. How do we prepare ourselves for arousal? Because it's situational. Many of us are in that situation now. It's difficult to predict how every individual is going to respond to a trigger because it's a complex relationship between the person, the task that they're trying to perform, and the situation that they're in. What we know is that when resilience is low or anxiety is high, lower levels of arousal will have the same effect. So when I am not sleeping and I'm not working where I usually work and I'm separated from my loved ones, it will take less of a trigger, less of a shake to push me over and out of my zone. Equally, people who are more experienced or very resilient may at times need to take significant risks in order to be excited or aroused enough to perform. Resilience is the ability of a person to roll with the punches. And maintaining resilience is going to be different for everybody. How do you stay strong and well? Sleep is really important. Regular meals. What do you need and do you have it? Caffeine. Be mindful about the stimulants that you use and when you use them. Hydration, especially now. Notice how alcohol affects your mood. Exercise and move your body every day. Take the time to notice your body and give it what it needs. Now, people think I'm crazy because I talk about safe sex, but intimacy is really good for you. Unplanned pregnancy and health scares, not so much. So take care of yourself. Mental resilience is about skills. And we learn a lot of these things at school and as we grow up and in our relationships with our families. Then we learn how to do things for ourselves, how to adapt, how to say no, how to trust our intuition and really go for something that we want. Being able to roll with the punches, to set goals that are achievable, to ask for help when we need it, are all skills that can really stand us in good stead in a situation like this. Now, anxiety is treated in several different ways. Cognitive strategies, talking therapies, are well evidenced. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the gold standard evidence-based approach to managing anxiety. And its core tenet is to explore that vicious cycle, looking at the thoughts that we have in response to things that we experience and how we behave when we believe those thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety and panic disorder often uses conscious breathing strategies to help people to experience and reinterpret and relearn these responses. There are lots of other mental health talking therapies that can be of benefit for anxiety and low mood. And there are lots of behavioral strategies, including relaxation, mindfulness, conscious breathing, yoga, supportive lifestyle, routine, and structure. There are medical options, including beta blockers and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and each of these things have their place. Many people use alcohol, but this impairs performance and cognition, and it also increases depression and anxiety. So it's not a strategy for long-term mental health. Many people use nicotine, particularly in anxiety. It's a good way to leave a room. It's helpful in the short term, but has extremely negative long-term effects. If you think that someone you care about is experiencing symptoms of mental illness, talk to them about it. Tell them that you're concerned about them. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them if you can support them. Ask them if they have sought help. Sometimes this seems like the hardest thing to do, but you might save somebody's life by bringing it up. In the UK, people can call Breathing Space, and I've provided the number here, but if you're elsewhere in the world, you can contact your local mental health hotline and just talk to somebody about what you're feeling. if you can persuade them to speak to their doctor, if you can persuade them to tell someone close to them what is happening, just acknowledging that there is a problem is probably the first and most significant step to dealing with it. So I want to talk to you about breathing for resilience and a practical approach. So we know in anxiety that people hyperventilate. By hyperventilation, I mean fast, shallow breathing that is happening unconsciously in a context of all of these other symptoms. The hyperventilation lowers the level of carbon dioxide in our blood because we're breathing out short and often. This creates a feeling of dissociation, not quite in your body, not quite there, not quite able to act. And physical symptoms, including things like headaches, dizziness, pain, dryness in the mouth, tingling around the lips, which often will allow somebody to escape from a situation that they're currently in. These sensations trigger feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that are all involved with that vicious cycle we were talking about. Our breath is the only function in our body that we can consciously control. And we can profoundly change our physiology by changing our breath. It's very difficult to have a panic attack if you've noticed that your breath was very fast and you've already slowed it down. So if we are aware enough of our breathing, if we are what's the word? I can't think of the word. If we're aware and skilled at identifying how we are breathing in any moment, then we have the opportunity to do something to change what we are experiencing. If we can recognize it, we can act, and we can prevent arousal from escalating into panic or overwhelm. So changing our breath can literally change our state. And that's not just from a sense of oxygen, carbon dioxide, heart rate, respiratory rate. It also has an impact on our heart rate variability, which is a marker of stress. And it has an impact on our neurophysiology and our mental health. These gold standard therapies like CBT and mindfulness provide a wealth of evidence for conscious breathing approaches when combined with talking therapies. There are hundreds, possibly thousands of alternative conscious breathing modalities that haven't yet been subjected to scientific inquiry. And the value of breathing alone has rarely been examined in the scientific literature. But what we can say is that conscious breathing allows a person to connect intimately with themselves on a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level. It allows people to become aware of their current state and well-being. It allows them to learn a mastery of their own breath. It empowers people to change their state in any situation. And it allows people to understand and integrate the experiences that they have had. Now, Dr. Ela Manga and myself developed a classification system to try and lay out very clearly the different levels and approaches to breath work, to try and make a classification so that people can approach breath work in the right way for them. We call this the art of breath work. And the A of art is awareness. So awareness practices observe the breath and the internal state, and they do not seek to change it in any way. They allow us to develop a knowledge of our current state and create the space for acceptance and understanding of what is. Mindfulness and meditation and body scanning are awareness practices that are safe, well evidenced, and helpful for people. The regulation practices use specific breathing patterns to achieve specific outcomes. And they provide a really practical intervention which can change the physiology in the moment. What they don't take into account is that we're all individuals, and each individual will have a unique response to an intervention. So we have to practice them and try them out so that we know what works for us in any situation. But in general, they can be used to regain a sense of balance when we are hyperventilating, to slow the breathing down and change the state. They can be used to relax ourselves when we are too excited, too aroused. And techniques that focus on lengthening the exhale will tend to do that. They can increase arousal for us when we need more energy. And there are techniques that very effectively will do that. The transformation practices are the T in the art of breath work. And they use a deeper and faster breath with the intention of processing trauma or reinterpreting our physical experience in a positive way. They use intentional over-breathing. I want to be clear, this is not hyperventilation. Hyperventilation is short, shallow, fast breathing that is unconscious. Intentional over-breathing that we do in these practices is purposeful, deep, diaphragmatic breathing that may be a little bit faster than our normal rate. What we know is that it creates a state of low blood carbon dioxide, but with a positive mental framework. And this process has been used for years in panic disorder research within a cognitive behavioral therapy frame. It allows us to relearn or reset our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors around the physical experience of high arousal, and it has deep psychotherapeutic benefits. Working in this way involves working in an altered state of consciousness, and it is best practiced with the support of an experienced professional breathwork practitioner. In summary, breathwork is a powerful strategy to become aware of our current state of arousal through mindful practice. Conscious breathing appears to be a natural and direct strategy to interrupt the anxiety cycle with immediate and significant value. Conscious connected breathing appears to be a tool that we can use to explore, understand, and transform our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physical experiences. Now, I want to talk to you about COVID-19. And I feel like I can because of all my experience and all my reading and all my research. And unfortunately, my personal experience with this virus. I became extremely breathless and extremely unwell a few weeks ago, and it was very frightening. And then I realized I was going to have to stay alone in my house for 2 weeks. And lots of other things happened. But then I realized that I was going to be alone in my house or at work for months. And what I wanted to do was connect my breath and meditate and breathe and relax and try and be present and understand this experience that I was having. And I couldn't. So I had to understand the limitations of my body and my energy during this experience, and I just want to share a little bit with you about that. So this current pandemic is creating an unprecedented opportunity for us to stop and reflect. And many of you know me will think I probably needed this virus to help me to stop. It has been a truly humbling experience, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath of it. Investing in our personal resilience and well-being has never been more required for all of the reasons that I talked about earlier. Now, this virus attacks our breathing, and therefore it's attacking our ability to feel empowered and our ability to self-regulate. So having the resilience and the ability to be flexible in our practice, to take support from other people, has never been more crucial. So I wanted to talk about a few questions and comments that keep coming up. Right now, breathing through our nose when we are in shared or public spaces is really important. Our nose filters and moistens the air that we breathe, and a dry mouth will increase the ability of COVID-19 to invade your throat and lungs. So if you share living space with other people, be mindful about the risks of breathing through an open mouth at this time. While I have been unwell, I have been unable to breathe through my mouth. And I think part of that is because there's a much bigger shift in my carbon dioxide level when I breathe through my mouth than when I breathe through my nose. Right now, it is not safe for us to work face-to-face with our breathwork clients. Social distancing really seriously saves lives. And we're not just talking about your life and your client's life, it's everybody you care about and everybody you come into contact with. So please stay home, stay safe, stay connected, and stay kind. An experienced breathwork practitioner will be able to support you through video conferencing. And if you need advice about where to look for a breathwork practitioner, there's a list of them on the IBF website. For those people who actually have the virus, breathing is significantly impaired for 7 to 21 days and possibly longer. They feel fine when they're resting, but minimal exertion will cause them to be extremely breathless. And the issue isn't about ventilation. They can get a deep breath in and out. The problem that they are having is one of oxygen exchange. They can't get enough oxygen out of their lungs into the blood and then into the tissues where it's needed. And this is leading to really significant illness and real difficulties for the intensive care doctors who are trying to treat these patients. So what we know is that conscious connected breathing and some of the other regulation practices that focus on the exhale can lower our blood carbon dioxide levels. When our blood carbon dioxide level is low, this makes it very, very hard for oxygen to get into the tissues where it is needed. And it is needed right now, not only for function, but also for healing. So for those people who actually have active symptoms of COVID-19, I wouldn't be advising conscious connected breathwork practices until they feel that they have recovered. What we need, all of us, is routine. Moving, meditating, setting an intention for the day, creating goals, smart, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-sensitive goals that we can work towards. Connecting with our loved ones and laughing and sharing that laughter and sharing positivity is going to serve us really well. And then we need to disconnect. I'm humbled and grateful for all the support that I have received over the last few weeks, and at times it has been overwhelming. Add into that social media commentaries and the news, and we are at real risk of exposing ourselves to significant mental harm. I encourage everybody to take at least 2 hours a day and put their phones and their tablets and their screens down. Rest regularly, feed your body regularly, feed your mind and soul by leaving the house, buy flowers, go in the garden, whatever you need to do. Stand in the sunlight and don't get arrested for doing so. What people with COVID-19 and with COVID-19 related breathlessness actually need are all of those things, and breathing practices that promote a slow, full and balanced breathing pattern.
Battery 100%. Connected to Philip's iPhone.
I was trying to subtly turn my speaker back on because it went to sleep. And of all of the practices that I know, and of all of the practices that I have shared and explored over the years, this is the one that I have found to be the most helpful during my own illness. Now, you might have seen there's a video that went around last week of a young doctor demonstrating an intensive care breathing technique, which involved 5 big breaths in, holding for a count of 5, and then after the 6th big breath in, doing a big cough. Now, I'm a performing arts specialist and I work with a lot of singers, so I don't love the idea of doing a big cough because that can cause problems for voices. However, do what your doctor tells you to do, and otherwise you could give this practice a try. Now, I've been using this practice for a long time. It's an ancient Qigong technique originally called the Hong Sa breath, and I've simplified it here to make it really easy and straightforward. It's great when you're feeling overwhelmed. It's a beautiful way to settle down and balance yourself in order to go into meditation time. I have used it when I've been coaching clients who were in a panic cycle with great success. And I have used it for myself as my conscious breathing practice daily for the last 2 weeks, because it was the only way that I could breathe and keep my breath connected without feeling breathless. So, the practice is very simple. We breathe in for a count of 4 through our noses. We hold for a count of 4. We breathe out for a count of 4 through our noses. and we hold for a count of 4. And I'd really like for us to spend a couple of minutes doing this practice together now so that you can experience it for yourselves. So I'm going to put some music on, that's why I did my speaker. So you can close your eyes and I will guide you. Once you've got the hang of it, you can go for it all on your own. So we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. And hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Breathe in, 2, hold, 2, 3. Breathe out, 2, 3, and hold. Breathe in, hold, exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Release. Receive. Feel. Let go. Be. Last one. Breathe in. Exhale. Just allow your breath to relax. Just notice how that's shifted things for you. In those 8 cycles of box breath. My friends, I hope that you have a beautiful breathing day. I know it's been a long day and we've talked a lot and breathed a lot and learned a lot. I hope that this settles those of you who are going to bed now, fastly to sleep, and that it's useful and helpful and comforting to the rest of you.